Welcome to The Breakdown with INFB. We're your host, Garrett Kelly.
And Heidi Gant.
On today's episode, we're sitting down with two keynote speakers to give you a preview of some of the topics that will be discussed at the Indiana Farm Bureau State Convention, December 12th through 14th in French Lick.
So if you want to prepare for those conversations at convention, or you aren't able to attend and you just want an idea of what will be covered, you're in luck today. First up is Jack Uldrich, a global futurist, renowned speaker, and best-selling author. So welcome, Jack.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks again for joining us, Jack. First, let's talk a little bit about your background. How do you become a speaker traveling the country, and what are topics that interest you as a futurist and an author?
Yeah, well, first, let me just tell you real quickly, first, what a futurist does for your audience. And I use the acronym, I call it the big AHA, but AHA is an acronym that describes what I do and what I think people need to do in order to prepare themselves for the future. And what the acronym stands for, the first A is awareness. You need to be aware of the trends that are going to transform your world. So when I'm in French Lick and mid-December, I'm going to be talking about continued advances in artificial intelligence, gene editing technology, robotic technology, drone technology, water technology, a whole host of things. So we have to be aware of how fast the world is changing. The H in AHA stands for humility. And what I mean here is we all need humility to the idea that the way we thought about our job or industry yesterday might not be how we think about those things in the future. And let me just give you one example. Maybe some of you have read about some of the gene edited technology, and Bayer is now working on short corn. And it's a new type of corn that might be able to withstand higher winds. And when the derecho hit Iowa and devastated corn production there a couple of years ago, this advance was in direct relation to that. So what our corn looks like might be different in the future. And maybe some farmers are already embracing photovoltaics. And Purdue University has done a lot of research as to which farmers might be able to benefit and which ones wouldn't from solar panels and other microgrid technology on their farms. So the physical structure of our farms might look a little bit different. We all just need humility to the idea that we need to change and the world will change and our customers and consumers will change. And then the final A in the big AHA just stands for action. As a futurist, I love this quote. I don't claim to predict the future, but there was a fellow who said, the only way to predict the future is to create it. But in order to create it, farmers are going to have to take different actions to position themselves for the future. And so in my presentation, I'll walk through some tangible actions that will help farmers future-proof their farms and their businesses against the trends that are transforming the world of tomorrow.
That's so interesting. I was actually wondering what a futurist does. So that's a great kind of introduction into that. But one thing to consider when you're talking about the future, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, is resources, whether that's land, talking about agrivoltaics, but water is a huge one that we've been talking about in Indiana specifically right now. Water rights, water quantity, they're both big priority issues for Indiana Farm Bureau going into the 2025 legislative session. You've spoken about these issues before, I know, most notably, I think at the FBF convention. So what do you see for the future of water as far as rights, use, and policy are concerned?
Yeah, and let me tell you, at least on water rights, because this is it's a political, it's a legal, it's a regulatory issue. And as a futurist, those are all things that when I said I can't predict the future, I don't know which way the winds are going to blow on those particular issues. But in terms of water quality and quantity, those are things that I can address. And from my perspective as a futurist, water is going to continue to become increasingly important in the future. And so farmers are always looking, you know better than I do, that it's a super tight margin industry and we have to look at every expense. And so I think what you're going to see in water is farmers getting a lot smarter than they already are on water usage. And this is where advances in artificial intelligence are going to come into play. When we have satellites and sensors, satellites in the sky and sensors in the soil and other technology on our tractors, artificial intelligence is going to be able to discern where the land is different, how the soil has changed, where is the sun hitting, exactly how much water does a specific area of your farm need? How do we get as smart about our water usage as possible about that? And I also think you're going to see a lot of advances around soil science and how we can get better about thinking about water. And maybe you followed some of the advances in biologics. So there are new hydrogels that we're putting on the seeds of crops that are actually soaking in water vapor overnight and allowing us to use water that we don't even really think about. So I think we're going to get a whole lot smarter about our water usage. But then I will tell you, there are other issues on the horizon with regard to water quality that we have to be aware of. And maybe you've started to hear the term PFASs, or forever chemicals, that for years, the Environmental Protection Agency didn't even know that these existed. And they were not knowingly, they just didn't know what they didn't know, but they were taking wastewater from industrial plants, creating biosludge, and then we were using that biosludge as fertilizer. We thought it was a win-win situation. We thought we were going to keep the rivers and our lakes cleaner, and we were going to give farmers an affordable fertilizer. And that's what we did for 50, 60 years. But now we've discovered there were these chemicals that we weren't testing for that are both in our fertilizer, and now they're in our land, and they're also in our water. And so I do think that we will see heightened both public concern and regulatory and political action around this issue. And I don't know how it will be resolved, but it's something that farmers need to be aware of, and we need to be thinking about it today. And then we need to be figuring out how to remediate and clean up both our land and our water. So those will be some of the things I will be touching on in my presentation.
That's great. And you've already touched on AI a couple of times, and some of the real world applications that are already out there. And then, even animal care, whether it's, monitoring temperatures and feed and that sort of thing. And then just in the real world, it's grabbing a lot of headlines now. You kind of mentioned some of the potential benefits to AI. Maybe what are some of the pitfalls that agriculture might face or needs to be aware of as we move forward into the future?
Yeah, well, I would say one, and let's just tie it back to water, is artificial intelligence has a lot of positive applications, and I will be the first to acknowledge that. But it has three really big problems that most people don't talk about. First, it consumes a lot of energy. And in order to create all of this energy, we need new sources of energy. We also need new data centers. And these data centers both consume a lot of energy, and they require a lot of water, primarily for cooling places. So I think that farmers are going to increasingly be in competition, not just with their next door neighbors over water, but with some of these big companies, the Apples, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, the Amazons of the world. And my guess is there are new data centers popping up throughout Indiana that are going to take some of that water. And then the third Achilles heel with regard to artificial intelligence is it's producing a lot of electronic waste. And this waste, these computer chips, super powerful, can do wonderful things, but they have mercury and lead in them. And right now we're just disposing of them. And so I think that that's going to be another issue that people are going to say, yeah, ChatGPT and these other things are great, but they're coming with a real cost. And so I think one of my responsibilities as a futurist is to tell farmers, here are the positive applications of artificial intelligence. Here's how you can do it to optimize your feed for your cattle. Here's how you can use it to optimize and get smarter about water. Here's how it's going to improve weather prediction. And here's how you might want to think about these things. But to say, on the other hand, there are these dangers and we just have to be aware of them. And so I actually think you're going to see the hype around artificial intelligence slow a little bit. It is the most powerful transformational technology of our lifetimes. And so I don't want to dismiss that, but I think you're going to see society sort of pull back a little bit, only because there are deeper moral, ethical, societal issues around artificial intelligence, which I won't, uh, I kind of briefly addressed them in the presentation, but that's not my area of expertise, nor is that's not what the Indiana Farmers Bureau is hiring me to talk about. So I don't want to dismiss those issues, but I just won't get into those deeper moral, philosophical issues.
Well, then we can kind of stay on that positive track, especially in the ag industry. Jack, what do you kind of see as some opportunities maybe that are on the horizon for the ag industry? I know ag's always changing and evolving, but any insight on what maybe the next big disruptor in the space might be?
Well, yeah, so from my perspective is I think what's really interesting, and I don't hear many politicians or even economists talk about this, but the number of satellites we are putting into space is phenomenal. But what we're putting on those rockets, or I'm sorry, I think I said the word satellite. What we're putting on those rockets are satellites, and these satellites are going to blanket the globe. And so I think the first thing, farming, we've been talking about the promise of precision ag for over a decade now, but it hasn't really taken root, only because broadband in many rural communities is still less than optimal. And it's getting a lot better. My guess is some farmers already have Starlink or some other satellite internet provider, but I really think that broadband is going to get significantly better in the near future because of satellite technology and because of the private sector. I don't think, regardless of what the federal government does and talks about laying down fiber, I think technology is sort of passed over fiber, that where satellite is the big technology. But I think satellite technology also is going to revitalize rural communities. I think a lot of people understand that the quality of life in rural America is better, but up to date, because broadband hasn't been as good, it's been difficult to work remotely there. Your kids can't access online education as well. Telemedicine is an issue. But as all of those things get better, I think more and more people are going to say, I love Indianapolis or I love big cities, but you know what? I kind of like the quality of rural life better. And now with better broadband, that we're going to see a revitalization of rural America. But the real reason farmers should be excited about rocket technology and satellite technology is only 4 billion people on the planet have access to the internet today. There are about 4 billion people who don't. And in the next couple of years, those 4 billion people are going to get access to the internet. And as they have smartphones and access to information, my guess is their income is going to go up. And as their income goes up, the first thing they buy more of is protein. So if you're in the livestock industry, very optimistic. I think also export markets should get better. Again, what the new administration does on tariffs and how Brazil and some of our foreign competitors sort of become competitors for these new emerging foreign markets is another issue. But just from a macroeconomic perspective, I think we're going to see increased demand for food and protein, and farmers, and I know it's been a tough go lately, and the industry always goes in cycles, but from a long-term perspective, I'm optimistic about the economic growth and economic opportunities for farmers.
That's great. Jack, your keynotes have been described as an opportunity for attendees to kind of look at topics differently or consider different perspectives. When you think about your time with us at the Indiana Farm Bureau State Convention, what might lead the conversation that way, or someone attending, what might they expect, or what mind frame should they be in to kind of really get the most out of it?
Yeah, I think I just want to go back to that AHA acronym again: awareness, humility, and action. And then I want to use sort of a farm-related metaphor for this. The awareness, I hope to really expand your minds, is to say, look, here's how fast the world is changing. Here are the things I think you should be thinking about. And there are going to be no fewer than 10 technological trends that I talk about in my presentation. The humility aspect, I also talk a lot about unlearning, that in order to embrace the future, you not only have to be aware of how the world of tomorrow is going to change, you have to know what to let go of yesterday's knowledge and techniques. The way you farmed and what you thought yesterday might not be what you need going forward. So you're going to have to actively unlearn some things about farming. And so I'm going to hopefully till your mind a little so some new ideas can take root. And then on the action, those are the seeds. I hope to say, look, if you want to future-proof your farm, your business, here's some things I think you should be thinking about. And let me just go back only because this humility and unlearning aspect is really important. I think one of the trends that we're going to see is our understanding of the microbes in soil is getting better and better. And to me, today we can't see what we can't see, but there are all of these bacteria, microbes in the soil. And farmers at some level know that they are important to increasing yield. But with new sensor technology, with artificial intelligence, we're going to suddenly, technology is going to start helping farmers see things that they haven't already been able to see. And it's going to tell them things that they don't already know. Many farmers, they've been on the farm for years, and their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents are, and they know a lot. But we are now having new tools that are allowing us to see our land, to see our crops, to see the soil, to see the water at a granular level. And these new insights, or this new level of seeing, is going to require us to do some things differently. So again, that's where the humility will come in to play.
Sounds good. Well, Jack, you'll be speaking at convention in the morning on Friday, December 13th. But if people want to learn more about you, the resources you have available, where should you tell people to go to find more about you?
My website, which is just my name, jackuldrich.com, and my name is spelled with a U instead of an A, so it's Uldrich. And then I do, and even if you're not able to attend the keynote presentation, I have a free weekly newsletter. I call it my Friday Future 15. And what I encourage everyone to do is every Friday, just take 15 minutes to think deeply about the future. Think about some of these trends and where you might need to change and what the opportunities and what the threats are. But in my newsletter, all I do is I just send out 5 articles and I say, don't even read all 5, but just read one, but then engage in the serious work of thinking about what that might mean for you and your business. And I always put at least one article that is agriculture specific in that newsletter. And maybe just to tie it back, go back to artificial intelligence, one of the things that I think is really interesting is AI is making better weather predictions. And Microsoft really recently came out with one, and they said it's 5,000 times faster. Now, that doesn't mean it's 5,000 times better, but here's what they're promising is today, weather forecasts can tell you if a severe storm or a tornado might be poised to hit central Indiana. 15-minute warning is good, but with AI, we can now do it in an hour. So those extra 45 minutes are going to help you get your laborers, your family off the farm. It's going to help you put your animals, protect them better. You might be able to store your equipment better. Those 45 minutes are a real benefit. And to me, that's just something that we need to be thinking not just about that, but like what's coming next and what are the opportunities and how can these technologies and trends improve my yield, improve my bottom line, and make my employees, my animals happier, safer, better for the community and better for the world. So at the end of the day, I just want people to know that I'm realistic about the change, both the good and the bad, but I'm ultimately optimistic. The future is going to be really bright, and there are a lot of reasons why Indiana farmers should be optimistic about the future.
That's great to hear. You've got my wheels turning already, Jack. We can't wait to hear you speak on Friday, December 13th, and we want to thank you for joining us for a minute here on our podcast today.
All right, my pleasure, Garrett and Heidi, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yep, we'll see you in Fritchlick.
At Indiana Farm Bureau, we care for our members. So when we learned many of them couldn't afford healthcare coverage, we had to act. The result is Indiana Farm Bureau health plans. an affordable, reliable, and service-focused approach to healthcare coverage. All Indiana Farm Bureau members are eligible to apply, and plans even offer Medicare supplements and dental and vision coverage in addition to medical. Learn how Indiana Farm Bureau health plans can help you care for your family at infbhealthplans.com.
Next up is Nina Teicholz, science journalist, author, and a Ph.D. in nutrition. So welcome to the podcast, Nina.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Nina. First, can we talk a little bit about your background in nutrition? What got you interested in the area of study? Where did you study, and why is that something you wanted to investigate as a career?
Well, I had no real interest in nutrition. I'm a journalist, and I have reported from Latin America, Washington, D.C. I worked for National Public Radio. And then I was freelancing and was doing a series of investigative food stories for Gourmet Magazine. That led to a huge blockbuster story on trans fats in the early 2000s and really sent me down the rabbit hole on all dietary fats, good fat, bad fat, the low fat diet, that's the nutrient that we have obsessed about most in pretty much in America, Americans in their diets. And so that ended up to spending 9 years researching a book that ended up being called The Big Fat Surprise. And that just sent me on this quest to try to understand really the relationship between diet and health, which is not at all what people believe.
So a cornerstone of that work, like you just said, focuses on saturated fats and fats in general as part of your diet. What do you see are some of those biggest misconceptions that people have as it relates to fat?
Yeah. So my book, which came out 10 years ago, really was the first to make the case systematically that we had unfairly vilified saturated fats and that they're actually the good fat, and that what we replaced them with, which is vegetable or now called seed oils, is more likely the bad fat in this scenario. And really there's a whole interesting history there about how clinical trials were ignored, about how this whole hypothesis that saturated fat and dietary cholesterol cause heart disease was promoted without any evidence, almost any evidence at all, and how that became sort of a runaway hypothesis that became a kind of nutritional dogma that was, and still to this day, has been impossible to overturn, despite now the presence of more than 24 systematic reviews and meta-analyses showing that those fats have no effect on cardiovascular total mortality and little to no effect on heart disease. So, I think we're now really looking at a situation where the science exists to exonerate these fats, but that science has not been able to rise up to the level of policy for a lot of reasons.
I guess that would kind of lead into a next question. So for a lot of our members, maybe some of those foods that are advised against or are part of, excluded from diets, maybe meats or butters, cheeses. How do we kind of turn the story around on those? That would be a great deal for farmers to have people accept those foods back, as part of a healthy diet.
Yeah, I mean, those are good, whole, natural foods that humans have been consuming for millennia, or in the case of meat, for millions of years. And I think, and they were condemned really in the 1960s due to their saturated fat content. Now, meat is condemned for a number of other reasons that I think are equally specious. But what is it going to take to turn the story around? Well, I mean, let's just, on a positive note, the story has turned around a lot. There are many more people. I mean, meat consumption is now rising, and butter consumption has been on the rise for quite a while. So is whole milk, as opposed to fat-free versions. And I think there is an opportunity now in the new administration for dietary guidelines to better reflect the science. And so I'm cautiously optimistic about that possibility.
So as a consumer, there's a lot of potential misinformation out there, marketing tactics that we come across every day. So say I'm shopping or ordering out at a restaurant. How can we make sure that the information that we're consuming is is accurate?
Well, the short, unfortunate answer is I don't think you can. I mean, I don't think there are almost any good sources of nutrition information. Our mainstream media fails that test, and so does a lot of the alternative media. So I lamentably, I don't have a good place to go. I would say anybody is more likely to find better information from non-mainstream media on these topics. And yeah, I don't have like a great answer to that. I would say, read my work. But we desperately need that. So I mean, I would say, like, if in this new administration there's a possibility for real science, evidence-based change, then wouldn't it be amazing to have a government that actually can convey that to the people? That would be the best option.
Nina, during your keynote at our convention coming up here in December, you'll cover some of this research and findings. Can you give kind of an idea for maybe if people can't make the trip, some of these things you might cover, or what they should expect, or what they should be thinking when they take in your keynote?
Yes. I mean, I will go over the history of how saturated fats came to be vilified. What led to that? Why was that hypothesis about saturated fats so adopted overwhelmingly with so much enthusiasm despite very little evidence? What then happened in the research community in terms of overturning that that understanding of saturated fats, how that was ignored, and maybe most importantly to some people, why it was ignored. What are the political, commercial, ideological forces at play here that keep a hypothesis, a disproven hypothesis, alive, and further demonize, especially meat products? Like, what are the forces acting here? I try in my reporting to really pull back the curtain. I've done a lot of investigative research about what are the groups, where does the money come from? Like, why are we being told these messages that really have no basis in good science? So I hope to do the science, the history, and the politics.
It's very interesting. So Nina will be speaking at the INFB State Convention in the afternoon of Friday, December 13th. Until then, Nina, where can people find more information about you and your work?
I think the best place to find me right now is on a platform called Substack. And I write a column there called Unsettled Science. So you can sign up for free, or you can sign up to support me. And that's where I'm currently doing the most work.
Perfect. Well, we look forward to meeting you in person and taking in your keynote, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting you both too, and everybody out there.
If you enjoyed our conversation today, make sure to subscribe to The Breakdown with INFB, and even rate and review us to let us know how we're doing. For more information, visit www.infb.org/podcast.